Here's another love language: gift giving. Gift giving is incredibly important in some cultures. We think of Maori culture with koha and so on. A gift is something that you can hold in your hands. It's a tangible reminder of your spouse's love. It says something like, hey, he was thinking of me, or she remembered me. It says that they took time out of what they were doing to do something for you. Gifts are visible, visual symbols of love that stick around. You know, they're the things that are on the mantelpiece or on the walls and so on. They're the things that you can pick up and glance and look back over the years. They'll bring back memories and feelings of love. I know that for Nikki, first Valentine's Day, I went on the way home. I thought I'd better get her a rose, and it was late in the day, and you know what it's like on Valentine's Day. They're all sold out. And I went to this florist place or dairy, and they had one rose left, and it was this droopy little thing. And so I paid, I think, $14 for it. But I thought I'd better do it. It was very sweet. So I bought this rose home. Happy Valentine's Day, Nikki. That was a long time ago. You know, it's still pinned to the wall. All the petals have dropped off now, but it's still there, pinned to the wall. The stalk's still there, that's right. So, yeah. But I can tell you a story about why that's there. No, we won't go there. Let me give you a story, I think a very powerful story about gift giving from the book, actually. I think it illustrates it so well. Jim and Janice both grew up on farms in central Illinois, about 100 miles apart from each other. They moved to Chicago shortly after their wedding. And I was hearing their story 15 years, this is Gary speaking, and 3 children later. Janice began talking almost immediately after we'd sat down. She said, Dr. Chapman, the reason we wanted to take you to the airport was so that we could tell you about our miracle. And something about the word miracle always causes me to brace myself, especially if I don't know the person who is using it. I wonder what kind of bizarre story I might hear. But I kept my thoughts to myself and gave Janice my undivided attention. I was about to be shocked. She said, Dr. Chapman, God used you to perform a miracle in our marriage. And I began to listen very intently. Janice continued, 3 years ago we attended your marriage seminar here in Chicago for the first time. And I was desperate, she said. I was thinking seriously of leaving Jim, and I told him so. Our marriage had been empty for a long time, and I'd given up. For years I'd complained to Jim that I needed his love, but he never responded. I loved the children, and I knew they loved me, but I felt nothing coming from Jim. In fact, by that time, I was beginning to hate him. He was a very methodical person. He did everything by routine. He was predictable as a clock, and no one could break into his routine. For years, she continued, I tried to be a good wife. I cooked, I washed, I ironed. I cooked, I washed, I ironed. I did all the things that I thought a good wife should do. I had sex with him because I knew it was important to him, but I felt no love coming from him. I felt like he stopped dating me after we got married and simply began to take me for granted. I felt used and underappreciated. When I talked to Jim about my feelings, he'd laugh at me and say, we've got as good as marriage as anyone else in the community. He didn't understand why I was so unhappy. He would remind me that the bills were paid, that we had a nice house and a new car, and that I was free to work or not, that I should be happy instead of complaining all the time. He didn't even try to understand my feelings, and I felt totally rejected. Well, anyway, she said as she moved to tea and leaned forward a little more, we came to your seminar 3 years ago. Never been to a marriage seminar before. Didn't know what to expect, and frankly I didn't expect much. I didn't think anyone could change Jim. During and after the seminar, Jim didn't say too much. He seemed to like it. He said you were funny and told some jokes, but he didn't talk with me about any of the ideas in the seminar. Didn't expect him to be honest, and I didn't ask him to. I'd already given up by then. And as you know, she said, the seminar ended on Saturday afternoon. Saturday night, Sunday, pretty much as usual. But Monday afternoon, Jim came home from work and he gave me a rose. Where did you get that? I asked. I bought it from a street vendor, he said. I thought you deserved a rose. And I started crying. Jim, I said, it's so sweet of you. In my mind, I knew that he had bought it from the Mooney that I'd seen selling roses on the street corner not too far away, but it didn't matter really. The fact was, he had bought me a rose. On Tuesday, he called me from the office at about 1:30 and asked what I thought about his buying a pizza and bringing it home for dinner. He said he thought I might enjoy a break from cooking dinner. I told him that I thought the idea was wonderful. So I brought home a pizza and we had a fun time together. Children loved the pizza and they thanked their dad for bringing it home. I actually gave him a hug and told him how much I enjoyed it. When he came home on Wednesday, he bought each of the children a box of Cracker Jacks and he had a small potted plant for me. He said he knew that the rose would die and he thought I might like something that would be around for a while. I was beginning to think that I was hallucinating. I couldn't believe what Jim was doing or why he was doing it. Thursday night after dinner, he handed me a card with a message about his not always being able to express his love to me, but hoping that the card would communicate how much he cared. And again I cried. I looked up at him and I couldn't resist hugging and kissing him. Why don't we get a babysitter on Saturday night and the two of us go out for dinner, he suggested. That would be wonderful, I said. On Friday he stopped by a cookie shop and bought each of us one of our favourite cookies. Again he kept it as a surprise, telling only he had a treat for dessert. By Saturday night, she said, I was in orbit. I had no idea what had come over Jim or if it would last, but I was enjoying every moment of it. After our dinner at the restaurant, I said to him, Jim, you have to tell me what's happening. I just don't understand what's going on. She looked at me intently and said, Dr. Chapman, you've got to understand, this man had never given me a flower since the day we got married. He had never given me a card for any occasion. He'd always said it's a waste of money. You look at the card and then you throw it away. We've been out for dinner once in 5 years. He'd never bought the children anything and expected me to buy only the essentials. He'd never bought a pizza ever home for dinner. He expected me instead to have the dinner ready every night on the table. I mean, this was a radical change in his behaviour. I turned to Jim and said, what did you say in the restaurant when she asked you what was going on? Well, Jim said, I told her that I had listened to your lecture on love languages at the seminar, and I had realised that her love language was gifts. And I realised that I had not given her a gift in years, maybe not even since we'd become married. I remember that when we were dating, I used to bring her flowers and other small gifts, but after the marriage, I figured, or the wedding, I felt we couldn't afford that. I told her that I decided that I was going to try to get her a gift every day for 1 week and see if it made a difference. And I had to admit, I'd seen a pretty big difference in her attitude over that week. I told her that I realised that what you said was actually really true, and that learning the right love language was the key to helping another person feel loved. I said I was sorry that I'd been so dense all those years and had failed to meet her need for love. I told her that I really did love her and that I appreciated all that she'd done for me and the kids, and I told her that with God's help I was going to be a gift giver for the rest of my life. It's a pretty powerful example, isn't it, of what happens when you learn the love language of your spouse and actually start to share it. But you know, the story doesn't end there, because I guess the question we've got to ask or wonder is, what was Jim's love language? You read the last paragraph. I turned to Jim and asked him, what about you, Jim? Do you feel loved by Janice? And Jim replied, Dr. Chapman, I've always felt loved by her. She is the best housekeeper in the world. She is an excellent cook. She keeps my clothes washed and ironed. She's wonderful about doing things for the children. I know that she loves me because of all these things she did. And she does. And then he smiled and said, and you know what my love language is now, don't you? And his love language is what is called acts of service. Acts of service. And it's quite a difficult one, really, because men often have acts of service as their love language, and they make the mistake of thinking that their wives have the same love language as well, when in fact most of the time they don't. And men can't quite understand why wives are not happy with all the things and stuff that they do for them, like being a good provider and so on. Acts of service is simply about doing the things you know your spouse would like you to do, and it can be as simple as things like vacuuming the house, doing the dishes and so on. For me, my love language is acts of service, and it probably came home most strongly for me 3 years ago when I took Rebecca up to university. I love my kids, obviously, but how do I show my love for my children? What I did for Rebecca was Nikki gave her a hug and cried when she left. What I did was I put her in the car, packed up the car with all of her gear, drove her up to Wellington, installed her in a flat, went out and found out where the bus routes were, bought her a snapper thing so she could actually ride the bus, rode the routes with her so she knew where to go and get on and get off. Got out my GPS and found out where the closest New World was so she knew where to go shopping. Bought little bits and pieces for the shop, left some money in her bank account, and then said goodbye and drove home. I think I did hug you before I left. But for me, what I realised was that for me, the way in which I show love is by doing things, you know. And but what I've got to realise is if that is not the love language of my spouse, it doesn't matter how much I do for her, she won't feel loved. And so I've got to actually learn what the love language of my spouse is in order that she feels loved as well. But the reverse is also true. Our spouses have to learn what our love languages are. And if our love language is acts of service, then we feel most appreciated when it's just those simple little things that are maybe done around the home or something like that. That's when we feel loved and appreciated. And again, that can be quite hard at times, because for some of us, we might not be that kind of like put it away kind of person. I mean, if I've got something in my hand, I don't put it down, I put it away. But for every other person in my house, they just put it down where they happen to be. So if I want to go find something like a pair of scissors, I go to my drawer, my scissors are gone. Why are they gone? Because they knew that when I put scissors down, they end back up where they started. So they go to my drawers to find things. But when they finish with them, do they put them back? No. So I get very frustrated by that.
I'm getting beat up.
You are. And when I find my scissors there, I go, oh Lord. And I want to give her a hug and kiss her. So we've got to discover what our love languages are. The danger is, of course, is that you never should do with love languages that are acts of service. Never do them. They've got to be done out of an act of love, an attitude of love. They cannot be done out of a sense of duty, and we should never allow them to become degraded into things that turn the other person into a doormat, because they're not. The final love language is physical touch. And while it might be argued that that's the primary love language of all men, it's not actually true. And nor is physical touch a euphemism for sex either. Human beings need touch. We do. You said an interesting thing about touch. What was it?
For mental health, they looked at that you need, human body physically needs 4 hugs a day for mental health.
Yeah, so 4 acts of touch a day. A human being needs 4 acts of touch, hugs or something like that a day, for their mental health, for their actual mental well-being. And it's true. And for some people it's even stronger than that. You've probably heard about the experiments in Nazi Germany and what happened with the Romanian orphans in places where in Nazi Germany they did an experiment where they had a number of children, and the nurses were instructed that with some of the children you would pick them up and you would smile with them, you would give them face-to-face contact when you were feeding them and changing their nappies, you'd talk to them and so on. And then there was another group of kids for whom they just did the bare mechanical necessities. They'd feed them and change their nappies and so on. And the kids that were actually shown love and picked up and talked to, they actually thrived. They thrived. Whereas the other children, some of them actually died. And they did not do well. And the same kind of story happened with the Romanian orphanages as well. We need, for those for whom your love language is touch, you need touch. It conveys a physical sense of acceptance, a strong sense of security about their being loved. And it can come in a lot of different forms. It can be as simple as hand holding, hugging, back rubs, right through, of course, to the sexual component. Now the trick in all of this is actually to understand both what your love language is and what your spouse's love language is. And so I've got a question for you this morning. Now, just to say, while we will probably have a primary love language, for some there might be 2 that are very strong together. For most of us there's one that sticks out more than other. And it doesn't mean, of course, that you don't have the others at all, but one will be the strongest. So ask yourself this question just for a moment or 2. When is it that you feel most loved? When is it that you feel, in a sense, most appreciated, loved, respected, valued by your spouse? Ask yourself that question, because that will help you to figure out what your love language is. Is it when you're being told you're doing an awesome job? Is it when you're being hugged? Is it when you get a gift? Have a think. people been able to figure out what your love language is? I mean, I know that mine is acts of service and Nikki's is quality time. What's yours, Stu? You know? Words of affirmation. To be told you're an amazing photographer. Words of affirmation. Possibly acts of service as well. Yeah. What about you, Pam? What's yours? Do you know? You like hugs. You like hugs. Yep. Yeah, I know that. Have a conversation with your spouse. Maybe not here. You know, the person that's close to you. Well, actually, Wayne, what's yours? What's your love language? All of it. Hugging. Yeah. Okay, so you want to make Nancy happy. Yeah. Work it out. Find out what yours is, and then ask your spouse what theirs is. You know, I would strongly recommend. You know, this is a good book to get. You know, it's a good book to get. And the thing is that once you start using this knowledge, actually discovering what your partner's love language is, and then starting to love them in that kind of way, you'll begin to see a change in them. You'll begin to see a change in. Now, the thing to remember is this: is that it won't happen overnight. It will actually take a little bit of time. And one of the danger in relationships, and I think this is important to mention, is sometimes we get a little bit like this. You say, okay, I need to do something. Well, I'm not going to start till they start. You know? I'm going to wait till they do something. Why should it be me who starts it? You know? Don't go there. Don't go there. You are in a marriage, or you're in this for life. You start. You committed yourself in the marriage vows to be there for your spouse, to love them, you know, to the day you die. You start. Don't wait for them to start. You start doing it, and stick with it for a while, because what you will find is that after a week or two, things will actually be starting to change on the other side. So don't just think, I'm not going to start till they start. That's the wrong attitude. You know, it's not a Christ-like attitude at all. We go first. Let us pray.